Hey everybody, it's Tom Christie back in the painting studio. This is just a quick video on the painting of a hen redhead, the head of a hen redhead. And this is an excerpt from a much longer video that I have for sale on my website at tomchristieart.com. It'll show you how to paint the entire bird, but I thought the head painting video would be helpful for those of you on my YouTube channel. All right, I want to start by mixing the side pocket color, and I've got three colors here. They're Josania colors. Raw sienna, about 50%. Raw umber, about 45%, and about 5% brown earth, mixed together to come up with this light, warm brown. And that took 2 coats. Next, I used my airbrush and some Josania burnt umber to darken the crown, and notice that I left the cheeks light, and I continued that burnt umber back down to the cape on the rear of the head there. Now I want to lighten this cheek somewhat, kind of right at the cheek line, leave the head dark. I'm taking the original face base color and lightening it a bit with smoked pearl, using that mixture on a kind of a filbert scrubber to go in right along the eye, underneath. I'm going to use the scrubber to kind of define the cheek line, but then fade that out and make this more of a highlight to the face. So I'm going to scrub in a little bit of a lighter cheek here. Leave it dark underneath. Same here. I'm going to scrub back and forth. I don't want that to look like a deep trench, but just a subtle, darker spot there where the cheek is. Same here. I'm going to wrap this around, bring it down, but leave that lower area where it approaches the neck dark. Just kind of fade that into that area by lightening the pressure on the scrubber and just hitting the tops of that texture. Now I've got a little more smoked pearl on the brush, same brush, and I didn't rinse this out. I just dabbed it in the smoked pearl so we get a combination of the color here. And we just want to put a pale lightness right behind the bill, also on the top here, so it's kind of around the entire front. I've got a little clean water on a filbert and just pulling that through the area to kind of blend the colors together. Take a little of the graininess out of that textured look. This area on the throat and down the neck a little bit is light. So I've got a mixture of smoked pearl and the original head color, kind of a very pale beige. And I'm using this filbert to get in there and scrub that area and begin lightening it. It kind of wraps from the front back to the side, and in this tucked head position, it's going to kind of fade into this area right here and not continue on around. So just up here on the front part of the bird, kind of up in that wrinkle. And I'm just scrubbing back and forth to build up the intensity. And I'll have to work on this a while to get it nice and soft and to make sure I've got coverage, build up the color intensity. We don't want this, we don't want this to be bright white. We want it to be nice and soft looking when we're done. Now I've got a little dampened scrubber, and I'm gonna, while I have the smoked pearl here, we don't want this to be wet, but not bone dry either. So I'm gonna use it to scrub in this little eye ring that's characteristic around the eye. I'm gonna wash that out, come back with just water and work again on the edges here to kind of, with clear water. You don't want a lot of water. I had too much there and it begins to pool. You just want the brush damp so that I can work it across these edges and blend the two colors together and soften the blend. And then once this material, once the paint dries, you can just use an X-Acto and remove the paint from the eye itself. It's just a quick look at the head after some of this preliminary blending has been done. Again, some smoked pearl, darkened just a little bit with raw sienna and the side pocket and head color. Really trying to match this color that we put in before, and I'm pulling in some feather barbs across this transition to soften the transition between this light patch area and the breast. Now I just added some smoked pearl to lighten that mix, and I'm going to pull a few lines through here to just show a little detail in these feathers of the neck. Okay, I've got that same mix that I had to put these highlights in the breast and a detail brush. And I'm just starting to add some feather, little arcs of 3, 4, 5, 6 coming out of this lighter area of the cheek, and put some feather structure into this soft brown head. And we can always tone this down a bit with a wash if I feel like they're too light. So I'm going to do that as we go back, and then I'll also pull in some highlights from this highlight line into the cheek. I'll show you that when I get a little further along here. A little farther along on the cheek markings, and just want to pull some flow lines through this cheek area. On the crown here, I'm using the original cheek value, so a little darker than those markings we were using on the side, and I'm doing a similar thing. Just some subtle feather structure here, little arcs. And again, if these appear too light, I can always come back and darken them up with a wash. So this is very repetitive. I'll go ahead and do the head and pull that in. These are going to meet in the center, so we'll have some subtle markings back here as well, but primarily up in front. It's just a quick update on the status, and I've got a little raw umber wash on a filbert brush, and I'm just going to use that to knock down the brightness of these markings a little bit. I think they're a little too bright, and I want them to be more subtle on the crown here. I used a little raw umber to pull a few flow lines through the cheek, and now I've got carbon black and burnt umber on the brush, and I'm just going to pull that through this detail, kind of overlapping flow lines to help define the feather flow on the head. Kind of break these up a bit. For the bill, I'm using a touch of cobalt blue with gesso, white gesso, and then add a touch of raw umber and just a little bit of carbon black to come up with this kind of blue-gray base color. I'm going to paint that on the entire bill. The underside of the bill is going to be dark, so I take that back. We'll paint the lower side carbon black. This will take a couple of coats. I'm going to paint the lower mandible and the underside of the bill carbon black. I'm going to use carbon black and the detail brush to go right along the cheek here. Put a little darker mark there on both sides. The nostril, carbon black. And take a little damp scrubber with very little paint on it, carbon black, and I'm just scrubbing that across this hard line to soften the transition between the blue-gray and the black. There's a light band that goes across the end of the bill before you hit the black tip. I've got a little filbert scrubber and some smoked pearl. I'm going to go in here and build up this color gradually by just scrubbing back and forth across it. Then we add the black tip with carbon black. That goes back on each side a little bit. Now I'm using that little scrubber again with black like we did here, and just scrubbing back and forth carefully over this black line, and softening that line a little bit in the transition between the white and black. Now I've got a little chisel shape scrubber and just a little darker shade of the bill color, and I'm going in and scrubbing in a little bit of a darker value on the top of the bill here. And scrubbing that out to the white area and trying to keep it very soft. Gonna do a little bit on the side of the bill as well, both sides. Taking just a very thin wash of gold oxide and brushing that on and just kind of warming the color up a little bit here. Just a quick look at the finished bird before I seal it, and I'll seal it up with a couple of coats of Tester's Dull Coat, and then I'll put some sheen on the bill with Deft Semi-Gloss.